welcome. How are we?
Good. Nice to be home in Glasgow.
Excellent. So I've been really looking forward to this, so I really appreciate you giving up your time. I normally like to start my podcast by just briefly introducing guests, but when it comes to you, I'm going to have to take a deep breath and go through this long list. So forgive me if I miss anything or get it in the wrong order, but there's quite a substantial amount to introduce here. So you're currently the Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at EY, which really puts you at the forefront of digital transformation and adoptions of technology like AI. But back in 2001, you founded a company called CERN that you basically grew into one of the world's leading digital agencies. And that was then later sold to EY, which I'm sure we'll talk about. You're also a pivotal figure in AI policy because you're the current sitting chair at the Scottish AI Alliance. In between all this, you found time to write a book, AI by Design. So anyone who's interested in finding out the principles of AI and the challenges, a really good read. And it's quite simplistic the way it breaks it down. So I would highly recommend that. You've been inducted, into the British Interactive Media Association Digital Hall of Fame, which is a real who's who. And at the start of this year, you were honoured with an MBE for your contributions to tech. Have I missed anything?
Gosh, it sounds exhausting just thinking about it.
It was exhausting. It was exhausting saying it.
Along with all of that, I guess, I've had time to build a lovely wee family.
Yeah.
My husband, Sean, my sons, Ross and Jamie, and my daughter, Sophia. So it's been busy.
Yes. In between that, building a family as well.
Indeed.
Hat off to you. So I've had the pleasure of your company before, and you touched on your story, which was absolutely fascinating. But it's exactly that. It's your story. So rather than me butchering it like I did with your past, where do we start?
Well, I guess I moved abroad when I was 10 years of age. My father worked for IBM. And IBM in those days was really much about hardware rather than the software business they are today with Watson X, etc. And we moved to Paris when I was 10. So we left Glasgow, which was home, moved to Paris, which was, really different. And there I went to an international school. And for the first time in my life, I happened upon all these subjects that just hadn't been taught in the Scottish curriculum. And one of the subjects that I learned a lot about was computing, but also equally psychology. And what I ended up doing as a career and my entry into the world of technology was human-computer interaction. And it's the interaction of the disciplines of psychology and technology. So it was from the age of about 10, 11 that I decided what I actually wanted to do for a living. And that's really where my story starts. My story starts by saying, as a young kid, how do I become one of those people that designs technology for the benefit of its users. So how did technology come together then? Because
obviously psychology, most people end up being a psychologist or doing something more clinical. So how did the technology bleach into it? Because you actually were involved from technology from quite early on in your career.
Very early on, yeah. So I went to do an undergrad in psychology, and part of that undergrad enabled me to go back. So I was in Stirling University, enabled me to go back to France to study. And it was whilst I was there doing a year's exchange program through Erasmus that I happened upon the field of human-computer interaction being taught at university. Human-computer interaction is how you design systems by tapping into people's mental models about how they want to interact with the system, and then you interact with the coder or developer to build the system in the manner with which the user feels most happy. So by studying that, I then came back and I thought, gosh, this is fascinating. Went to Glasgow University to do a master's, and it was during that time that I started looking at dissertation topics and what I wanted to do post my university. And I was fortunate enough to receive a job offer from Barclays to build the first online bank in the UK.
Wow.
So that was in 1995. It was called PC banking at the time.
I think we forget how young internet banking really is.
It really is, yeah, absolutely. So in 1995, it was about PC banking. By 97, with the internet coming along, they were talking about interactive systems. And then it was launched quite quickly after that. So I was very fortunate at the age of 24 to start helping that organisation build the first online bank, which was amazing.
That's incredible. So how, at the age of 24, do you end up with such a role? I feel there's a step missing there.
looking back now, you'd think, gosh, that's insane. How's a 24-year-old get that kind of responsibility? But actually, it's a really good story. The CEO of Barclays at the time was a chap called Martin Taylor. He was the youngest ever CEO of one of the major banks in the UK. He happened upon the internet in an article he was reading about the World Wide Web. And he thought to himself, this is where banking is most likely to go. We're likely to be able to move money online. We're likely to be able to save money. We're likely to be able to do more with our Barclay cards online.
Quite insightful. At that
very,
time.
very insightful. And he'd heard about this wee lassie that had joined the company that was sat way many floors below him in London, in Lombard Street, which was the head office. And he'd heard about this wee lassie that was doing this project that was trying to get the URL for barclays.co.uk and barclays.com back from someone who was cyber squatting on it. And this wee lassie in some comms team in the building was doing it. And so all of a sudden I was sitting at my desk one day, 1997, and I'd been working in a bit of the kind of digital field and doing some things with PC banking. But it was 1997, a couple of years after I joined, that he headed down to my floor, the 5th floor of Lombard Street. And you could see everyone in those days, everyone sat in an big open plan office. And there were little screens between you and the next person and the next kind of like pod. And you could see everyone ducking, all their heads just went down behind these screens. Yeah. And I looked up and I'm like, what's going on here? So my head was still above the parapet, so to speak. And he just walked towards me, and I'd seen him on, news articles, and I'd seen him on the telly and all the rest of it. Never met him in person. He walked right over to the desk and he said, "Are you Catriona Campbell?" And I said, "Yes, I am, sir." I don't really know what to say. How do you address the big boss? Exactly. And he said, "My office, please. I'd like to discuss something with you." Well, of course, your mind goes to, what the heck have I done? I'm going to be fired tomorrow, or today. But my boss joined. Now, he was the big boss. He was the head of communications for the bank. So he joined. We went into the office and Sir Peter Middleton was sitting there. He was the chairman. So you've got the chairman and the CEO and this wee lassie, and they turned around to me and they went, "This is going to be big. We need those URLs, those website addresses, because we want to do more with online banking and PC banking, and we want you to help us." And I said, "Okay then." So that was the kind of start.
Wow.
I think it was having the right knowledge and being in the right place at the right time. But also I think my boss implicitly trusted that I would get the job done because I'd maybe built a bit of a reputation in that kind of graduate program that I was on, just getting things done. And obviously I had the right background. So lo and behold, I found myself in charge of a team, in charge of a budget, and in charge of building the first site that the bank had.
So what was the first functionality of that day one launch? What could you do on it?
Oh, gosh, next to nothing, Danny.
Look at your balance?
No, you couldn't even look at your balance. So the day one launch was branch locator.
Oh, right.
So really it was all about the branches. At that time, Barclays had tons of branches all over the United Kingdom. And, people didn't know where they were, how to use them if they were traveling, etc. So that was the number one piece of functionality. But what was really interesting about the way we designed all of online banking at Barclays and everything that we did, including mobile banking, etc., was that we started with the user's preferences. So we very much use a user-centered design process. So we asked people, what is it you most want? If you could do anything and we could put the banking brochure online, what bit of functionality do you need the most? So it wasn't form over function. It was definitely function first. And so the branch finder was the one. Telephone numbers for the branches.
Yeah. How do I get through the branch?
Yeah. How to get through to your branch manager. And then we started putting offers and savings rates and ISAs and TESAs and all of the products that the bank sold online. So it became a bit more like a sales application. And then we started looking at, okay, how do we now integrate our legacy system, our back-end system, and allow people to see their balance, allow them to see their savings accounts, their mortgage, et cetera, et cetera.
And and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but banks are famous for having big monolithic data sets that are all siloed.
Yes.
So that must have been quite a challenge about trying to integrate the concept of a data warehouse before that was really a thing. Absolutely.
And I think we were very, very lucky within Barclays to have some really quite intelligent data people at the heart of what we did. One of the really interesting examples was when we built the online bank, and yes, really tricky in terms of data optimization. One of the partners that we had was Tesco. At that point, I think £1 in £5 was being spent with Tesco in the United Kingdom. And Barclays said to Tesco, listen, we've got a partnership here. We can see the outgoings of how many people are spending money with you online. Wouldn't it be great if we could create joint services, joint products, et cetera, et cetera? So a company called dunnhumby was doing a lot of work on the Tesco loyalty card at that point, the Tesco Club card. And so I think through the relationship that they had with some of the best retailers in the UK, the data people became way more savvy than in any other bank, and we were able to use lots and lots of really, really intelligent products and systems to best leverage the data they had.
Data's king.
It is indeed.
Yes,
It is indeed.
So how did CERN come about then?
Oh, so I left Barclays after just 4 years. I joined the biggest company in the world at the time, GE. General Electric, which was run by a man called Jack Welch, who was just a phenomenal business leader. Owned part of the organisation was called Global Consumer Finance, a big banking business. So I joined that. And my day one job was effectively to look at where the Global Consumer Finance team had web-enabled services. And where they had most web-enabled services was across their store card estate. Now, I don't know if you'll recall, but Burton's and Topman and Topshop and Monsoon and all these brands, Marks and Spencer's, House of Fraser, Harrods, all had store cards. And so instead of using cash, you could use your store card and pay it off the following month when you got paid, or pay it off over months. And so my day one job was go into a group of companies called Arcadia Group, who own Topshop, Topman, and go in there and say to them, listen, we'd very much like store card functionality to be built into the Topshop website and the Monsoon website and the Racing Green website, et cetera, Burton website, because the store card functionality wasn't in there. All people were doing is they were buying their outfits in Topshop and they were putting them on their debit card or their credit card. We wanted our store card functionality there. So I walked into this meeting and it was on the top floor of this big building just off Regent Street in London. And the CEO of Arcadia was in the room. So big, important person. At this point, I'm 25, right? And I'm the only representative of GE in the room. There's about 20 of them in this big boardroom. And the CEO said, so big American guy, what are you going to do for us? I said, well, we'd like to build store card functionality into your websites. And he went, nah, we're good. And I said, well, we're willing to pay for it and it will make it so much easier because people will have more choice. So I think you'll find that it will be really beneficial. I said, okay, show me your presentation. So I went through the presentation. I said, your customers, we've sampled your customers. They're asking for this. So, the premise was there. They really wanted it. So anyway, he asked the room to be cleared. And he said, except you, stay here. So that was me. So I'm like, oh, another one of those scary moments. Everybody left the room. And the CEO and I were there, and he said, you're onto something here. This is really good. This is really good. What you're talking about, building it with customers in mind and building this and doing that, he said, this is the future of retail. And you really should consider setting up a company to do this. I said, well, I've just joined the biggest company in the world. I work for GE. I'm very, very happy. Thank you very much. And he said, well, you should consider it. That was the start of the germination of this idea that maybe, even though I was a young female, I'd be able to do something like this at some point. But given my dad was a big company man, I hadn't really considered it. I thought I'd got to, a really good place in my career working with the biggest company in the world. But in the same vein, I was thinking maybe I could build something. So I left. I spoke to friends and family, and they were all saying, go for it. This is .com boom time, do something. So it was at that point that the idea started.
That, and I think what a lot of people think about starting their own business, how hard it is to make that first step. That's where probably the majority of business ideas fail.
Yes.
About, I'm going to leave a job and I'm going to start it. So how did that process work for you from the initial idea from the big American chap? Your accents were fantastic there. How do you actually get that to something that's trading?
Yeah. So the CEO's name was John Horner. John Horner had effectively said, I haven't found any agency doing this in the UK. So I started there. I started looking into, well, who does this in the UK? What technology companies are out there designing this? And I did find a few, but I thought, something, well, that's a good thing. Obviously, they're in business because people are buying their services. I also had built up a great number of friends in the kind of internet community because I'd started so early on. And the other happy coincidence, Danny, was that there was a thing called an internet incubator available at the time. Those were organizations that had office space. They would give you funding, they'd give you people, and they'd give you advice and guidance if they liked your business case. So there were maybe a dozen internet incubators. So a bit like our Y Combinator that we have, or Tech Scalers in Scotland. So I decided that I ought to build a business case and go out to these internet incubators. At the same time, I wanted to raise some money to do this appropriately because I wanted some of the UK's leading people to join me to do this. And it wasn't going to be a woman band. It was going to be a launch with a number of good people. So I built the business case with some help from friends and family and then started walking the streets trying to get investment. That's when the story turns a little bit sour.
All good stories have a turn.
They do. It'd been relatively easy up to that point. So trying to get VC funding as a single female, where 1% of females actually, even today, according to Anna Stewart's Pathways report, even today still receive investment from 1%
Wow.
of female entrepreneurs, solo female entrepreneurs receive investment. That was not easy. And I hadn't quite appreciated how tough it would be. I was turned away. And eventually, after about 10 meetings, I turned around to a kind of friendly VC chap who'd been there. And I said to him, listen, what is it about me or the business case that's just not nailing it in these meetings? And he said, well, come on, you're a single female. At that point, I had an engagement ring on. He said, you're going to get married, you're going to have babies. Who the hell would invest in you?
Wow.
Now, thinking about it now, you're saying, wow, it's wow.
Yeah.
How could that happen? But, 20 odd years ago, that was probably quite commonplace. So I thought, well, that's really interesting. And I went back and I put a great deal of thought and consideration into this. And then I thought, something? I'm going to have to hire a couple of males to go to meetings with me. And that's exactly what I did. So the very next meeting, along with a couple of really fabulous people who were helping me, with them being very, very scripted. We walked into the next meeting and I left with almost £1 million on the table as an offer from the first meeting. Walked into the second meeting. It was £500,000 in cash, £500,000 in services and office space. And it went on from there. And one of the companies actually was very interested, was backed by EY, funnily enough, many, many moons ago. And I really, really liked the internet incubator that I eventually went with. And the firm, when I eventually did say, listen, unfortunately, it's just me, those two other chaps are actually,
actors
may not be joining.
Yeah.
The chap said, it doesn't matter. We love your business case. We love the fact that you'll be CEO. And we love the fact that you've got a list of people you're going to employ once you've got the money. So let's go for it, which was great.
It was just getting over that initial hurdle.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So you needed a couple of male stooges to play the part. So the most difficult time in business, from my experience, is the first 2 or 3 years. Getting to that first £1 million turnover is exponentially harder than getting to the first 10. Fine. So what was the next jumping off point? There's normally a good story involved, a bit of luck, a chance meeting that actually helps you propel the business to the next level. Yeah.
Okay. This is great as well. I think in the first year, we hardly touched the investment. And within 3 years, we bought out the investor completely. So we were very, very profitable early on. And there's a good story here because one of our first clients was Skype. before Skype was
a
thing. Exactly. And the client came to us, and my colleague Marty Carroll dealt with the first meeting, and he came out of the meeting and went, "This is amazing. This is a voice over IP system that they want to be incredibly easy to use." And that was the essence of our company, was let's build it so that it's efficient, effective and satisfying. The three key goals of any really well-designed system. And so Marty said, "And they want to pay us." And I went, "That's amazing. Let's do it." The second client, our sales director, who was recently employed because we had that money, a chap called Paul Blunden. Well, he'd just written a bunch of letters to a bunch of companies that he'd spotted in the press might be doing things online. And one of them was the brand new thing called the National Lottery. And he got a response back. So the head of web services for the National Lottery phoned up, and Paul took the call, and he came off the call and he went, "They want us to come into a meeting to talk about designing the National Lottery." And I went, "That sounds amazing. What's the National Lottery?" He went, "Well, it's the government-backed way for us to, like a lottery." And I went, "Wow." So we ended up not just designing Skype in year one, but designing all of the lottery interfaces. So if you think about when you got your ticket, you could get your ticket from a kiosk in a Tesco or a Sainsbury's. Well, we designed that interface. The online system where you put in your preferred numbers and register, we designed that system. We designed their internal systems. So when people were going to the National Lottery, or they were going to Skype, or they were going to Barclays online banking, which, by the way, we retained as a client, we were able to say, "Oh, we designed that." So
it's a good story, isn't it?
The first year, getting some really what you'd call marquee clients for a tiny little business of a dozen people. I mean, that was just amazing. So if they trusted us, why wouldn't any other client?
Exactly.
So 3 years in, we had worked for 24 of the top 100 FTSE as clients. We had managed services agreements, i.e. money that was coming in monthly, so that we could expand our business. In year 3, we decided to acquire a web analytics company. So not only were we able to design technology, we were able to measure where users and consumers were going so we could amend the technology to improve it. So we had design, we had data within 3 years. And it was at that point that we bought out the investors because it was being really successful. However, just after we did that, unfortunately, the Twin Towers disaster happened. And that sent the markets obviously into turmoil. And we were waiting on a lot of, at that point, we were doing a lot of work, and we found that our debtor days were increasing. And because our debtor days were increasing, cash flow became a real problem. And it was at that point when we were doing really well, I don't think we banked on the fact that really large companies would effectively delay payment. Yeah. And as a small business, I mean, cash is king. So it was at that point where my co-directors and I had to stop paying ourselves for a period of time. It was a real worry. We carried on paying the employees, but it was a real worry. We had to do a thing called invoice financing, which is getting someone else to collect your cash. They give you the money to keep going.
It's a bit of a murky world, that as well, isn't it? Once you start on that path,
it really wasn't easy.
It's hard to get out.
Now, we could have gone and sold a bunch of shares, but we had such good clients. We knew that there weren't going to be a bad debt. We knew that they were just being slow at paying us. So we struggled through that period. But at that point, we got a great chairman on board. And he had exited a number of big digital companies. And he was phenomenal. So he took a share in the business, gave us a little bit of cash, took a share. And we didn't look back from that day, to be honest. We knew how to expand through those bumps, through market events, which are you can't control. And we carried on and on and on, and then ended up opening an office in Paris, in Dubai, in Riyadh, and just growing the business exponentially.
What's the favourite thing you've designed that people will know?
I don't know if this is going to be boring, but everyone in the UK must have interacted with the thing called the Whitehall Publishing System. So the Whitehall Publishing System is effectively the government backbone for you to do your passport online, your driver's license, your MOT, your tax return, your planning for your house. Everything you do online for the government goes through this one big system. And I was very fortunate to be able to be part-time kind of seconded into government in 2004 to help them build that system. But not just build the system, because they've got great developers, fantastic people. However, to build it so that it was effective, efficient and satisfying means for everyone. And so accessibility was at the core, at the centre of the design for this government system. So if you think about at the time, with banking branch closures and moving to online banking and post office closures and government online services was having to expand for everyone to use. And so what we did was we did a great deal of concerted effort to ensure that everyone could use online systems for the government. People who were partially sighted or who had other kind of traits or impairments, the elderly, et cetera. And so that was, I think, touches everyone in the UK. Mm-hmm. I think that was my favourite project. Yeah. It was a long time ago as well, but it definitely my favourite project.
That must have been a monster.
It was, yes, yes. But phenomenal service to the nation, I think.
Mm-hmm. Still going strong. So how did you end up with the exit of the business? So was that about 15 years you built and ran
2015,
that?
Yep, exactly.
2015.
Yep.
So what led, I guess, first of all, I'm always interested in what led to that psychological decision of, right, enough's enough.
Yep.
I want rid of this baby that's now a teenager.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I think much like a baby's kind of easy to manage. They're always in the house. Mm-hmm. Teenagers, you don't know where they're off to, what they're doing.
I'm in that just now. So.
Exactly. But it was much like that analogy, actually. The business had been quite manageable. Although we had an office in Paris and we tried Beijing, closed that down sadly, but we had Paris, we had Dubai, we had Riyadh. It was all quite easy to manage. But as the business expanded and we wanted to increase operations and more clients came on board, it was getting a little bit unwieldy. It was getting very large. And it was at that point where I thought, something that's probably, I'm a deep technical specialist. Mm. And that's the other thing. I read this brilliant book, Danny. It's called The Beer Mat Entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Chapter 3 of this book basically says, very often entrepreneurs are deep technical specialists. They're not general managers of huge businesses. Mm-hmm. They've never been general managers of big businesses. Mm-hmm. They don't have MBAs, generally speaking. Yeah, uh-huh. So why should they run a big business? Mm-hmm. And that chapter is called Killing the King. Yeah. And killing the king is that founder's got to step down and let someone who can do this stuff do it. Yeah. So in 2013, with the kind of realization this thing was being quite unwieldy and becoming quite large, the board decided to relinquish some shares to our net new chairman come CEO. And so we brought this chap in who'd been working in marketing services and agencies all over the world. And he'd sold a number of firms and he was our exit chairman. Mm. And we said to him, listen, within a couple of years, the plan is effectively to sell our business or to seek investment for a majority shareholder. And if that happens, then what we can do is we can expand more easily because they'll have the existing infrastructure, the offices around the world, etc., bigger client base. So that's the view. So a chap called Ben Langdon joined our business 2013, and by 2015, we'd gone through a number of different, chemistry meetings with various different acquirers, and we'd selected EY. Now, interestingly, EY, not only were they a phenomenal brand, I think it's the number one B2B business brand in the UK this year. Not only are they a phenomenal brand, but in terms of their principles, it very much suited us and fitted with us. So culturally, very, very much fitted our culture. And also the strapline for EY is building a better working world. Well, that's exactly what we've been doing by designing all of these things that we've been doing over the last 15 years. So when EY came along, it was an easy choice. Mm-hmm. There was a short list of 3, but they were by far the easiest choice. So that's how it came about.
And what advice would you give someone who's thinking about an exit of a business that's started?
So, I mean, for sure, I was not the right person to have sold that business and to have managed that business because I was managing it with co-directors as someone who'd never done it before. I'd never exited a business before. So bringing in that that new CEO come chairman was absolutely right. The margin improved over the couple of years that as he joined, so he got the margin up, and you're selling based on your EBITDA. So that meant that we were worth more. He also put in place and tidied up all of our kind of admin, if you like, so shareholder accounts and all the rest of it. And I think one of the other lessons was going through that process. You really need to identify really early on what type of company you want to be and who you want to sell to. So we had always thought that it would be an international operation because we had international aspirations and indeed had international offices that we would have to sell as part of the deal. So have a think about who you want to sell to. List them down, identify your targets, much like you would do a sales strategy. Sort out your back office, sort out your house, and then go for it. We also employed a third party to help us do that. They called Bullhound, and they had done a huge amount of work in this area. So obviously we were very well managed by them.
And what if there's a young person or a young female, probably more relevant, sitting listening to this with a fantastic idea who thinks, actually, I want to go on a similar path, get VC funding. What advice would you give to that young person?
Well, I think things are so much easier now. I have to say that the UK government, the Scottish government, have got incredible supporting programs. So there's the Tech Scalers program I mentioned in Scotland, but there's also equally lots and lots of incubators down south as well as up here. So my advice would be to research all of the ways that you could receive funding and receive support. Create your business plan with a view to who you would hire to help you do that. The talent is almost equally as important as the business idea itself, and the financials. It certainly did help me. So one of my colleagues joined from BT, where he was the head of UX UI, and that's that Marty chap, fantastic guy, absolutely brilliant. So also have an idea of your products and services, and if you can, mock things up to bring it to life. So you've heard of Figma. Figma, it now allows anyone to be a web designer, right? Use generative AI to create your catalog, your brochure, your imagery. Build it so people can understand it. So finances, talent, obviously business case, and make sure people understand it, and then go and seek that support. The other thing, Danny, that I mention a lot to entrepreneurs when I meet them is you're better off having a small proportion of something big than you are a big proportion of something small. And what I mean by that is when I sold the business, I ended up with just less than 30% on the day it sold, but I set it up and owned 100% on day one. But through various acquisitions and through various talent joining, that had changed, and I didn't see that as a bad thing. A lot of people say, no, I'm not giving away my shareholding. I've got to have 51%. Not necessarily. Get a good lawyer. You can have things called drag and tag along descriptors in your articles of association, so that your shares could be A preference shares. They could carry more weight than B shares. So have a think about how much of this are you willing to give away to the right people, so that you can grow your business.
It's all about the exit.
Oh, totally.
Isn't it?
Totally.
And the final number.
Oh, but do you know something? We had an awful lot of fun along the way as well. I have to say that it wasn't always built to exit. I wanted to have a lot of fun. I wanted to obviously make sure that I was designing things that were going to impact people and improve things. And that was a purpose for me, is a really big deal. I continue to work because I need purpose in my life alongside my personal life purpose. But that's really important to me. So it's not just about the money. It's certainly about building something that's important. Yeah, exactly. And enjoying it along the way.
So I always think we learn so much more from mistakes and other people's mistakes. There has to be a mistake within that, or probably multiple mistakes. Does any jump out?
Multiple mistakes. Well, I mean, one mistake very early on before setting up Seren, now called EY Seren, was I was asked to be an early investor of a company that I actually at the time didn't think was going to amount to very much. So these people came into the room, and I was sitting there, and they were pitching, and I left. They left the room, and I said to my colleagues, "I'm not sure about this." It was called Money Supermarket. Another mistake was I was doing a piece of research for a very big financial services client, and this big financial services client back in 2010, 2011 said, we think that cryptocurrency is going to be big, and there's this new thing on the market called Bitcoin. And I went, right. I couldn't understand how consumers would spend it because it wasn't in a wallet, it wasn't in your Visa, it wasn't in your online banking account. How are you going to actually spend? How are you going to use it? And so this client said, listen, will you do some research? We want you to buy 50 Bitcoins. 50. And then what we want...
60 grand a coin just now, aren't they?
Yeah. A lot. And what we want you to do is we want you to do some research with people, get them to move money around, see how easy it is to use it. So I said, well, I don't want to buy them personally, and the company doesn't want to buy them. You buy them, and then we'll just use, your cryptocurrency to do the research and to build the system. Big mistake.
Yeah.
Big mistake. I mean, it's worth millions now.
Yeah.
I didn't learn anything from that I could put to use because none of the consumers could use it.
Still can't.
It's just not the easiest to use, is it? So it hasn't been productized. And actually that has a good parallel with AI today. A lot of the Gen AI, amazing promise of AI, it's just not easy to use. I'm sure we'll come on to that. But the same with Bitcoin. It just isn't easy to use and wasn't. So another big miss.
So that's a lovely interlude you've given me, actually. So there's two schools at the moment. So everywhere you go, it's AI. Every product's AI, every service is AI, everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. If you put AI in front of something, it's intrinsically better for some reason. There is two clear camps forming. One, AI is going to have fundamental changes to the fabric of our society, including personal and work life. Then at the other extreme of that, it's a hype bubble. Here we go again. Here's another .com boom. And actually, we'll find a status quo and nothing much will change and we'll get on with it. Where do you sit? Where are you in between the two extremes?
Oh, well, I think I'd merge both of them, actually, just to be difficult.
Okay.
So I very much firmly sit in the first camp. This is an industrial revolution that we're going through, and it's going to fundamentally change the fabric of society. However, I do agree with Gartner's hype cycle. It is very much hype at the moment. But much like the internet had a hype cycle and came down from that hype cycle and then was implemented everywhere, I do believe that that's going to happen with AI as well. If you think about the internet in the early days, so kind of late 1990s, early 2000s, it just wasn't terribly easy to use at all. There weren't very many good products, very many good services. It was a bunch of backroom developers, techies, building stuff they thought was right and putting it on the internet. Google didn't happen until 2003, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So when Google happened, it was a search engine that you could search this plethora of sites, but it was really easy to use. You think about the front of the Google homepage, it still has this incredible clean lines, simplistic. It uses heuristics. So the design rules of thumb are called heuristics, and it's basically talking about interspatial differentiation. Is how your eye sees when there's blank bits between things. Okay. So Google has been built really, really well to enable us to use it really easily. I'll give you another interspatial differentiation example. You know, on your credit card on the front or your debit card, it's got those 16 digits and they're in blocks of 4. Well, the interspatial differentiation is the little space between those 4. And do you know why it's in 4? Because we in the West can remember 4 numbers.
Yeah.
Give us a 5th and we're not so good. So generally speaking, that's why it's there. So there's a block of 4. So when you read it out on the phone or you want to type it into something, you can do 4, 4, 4, 4. That's interspatial differentiation. So effectively designing sites well was then, for us, at the beginning of the internet, really important to the adoption Okay, so the same thing will happen with generative AI. We'll go through that hype cycle, lots of nonsense will be built, and then we'll come down and people go, hold on, we found the use cases. We're going to design this well, design it with the users in mind. So I mentioned user-centered design or human-computer interaction. That is the skill that we are sorely lacking just now when it comes to Gen AI. These applications are being built by these techies, and we're not really engaging enough with the users in order to make them usable.
Yeah.
So we can talk about examples, by the way.
No,
Because
an example would be great in terms of
right.
AI
Okay.
going wrong.
Good. So, I mean, let's talk about the world's most famous LLM, ChatGPT.
Yes.
So when OpenAI released the large language model as ChatGPT, it was designed by incredible scientists, incredible data people, incredible designers, absolutely. But it wasn't productized as much as we need it to be.
They just released it.
Just released it. Open source, great, fabulous, like everyone using it. It's a bit like, I guess it functions a bit like a search engine. They will need the user to understand what the inputs are and the user to understand how to use it. But it's not as simple as Google, is it?
No.
Prompts and RAG and all of the ways to make a large language model really work well for you, you need to actually create. So the user needs to be able to create the product around it. And that's not what we've done. We've just released it. Now, if I look at our own business, for instance, we've not just let loose our 400,000 people to use ChatGPT. We do have an instance of it, and we've built it into an enterprise front end. So we built a front end on it. Okay, so we're using it like an API. So we built this beautiful front end, and there's a section on our front end that says skills. And you click on a skill, and I'll give you an example, our HR skill. Okay, you click on HR skill as an employee in EY. I click on that. We know that there's the large language model behind it. It's going to generate my content when I ask a question. But we've also added all of our HR data and all of our HR policies into it. That's called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. It means it's retrieving from documents we've given it, it's augmenting its answers, and it's generating the text, right? So what we've done is we've got this little HR skill. I can go into that HR skill and I can type in, I want to extend my maternity leave. How do I do that, right? It will within seconds give me a response based on EY's policies and based on all of its knowledge that it has in there. And it'll then give me the reference to the section and the page of the document it's referred to so that I can make sure I'm comfortable that that's the truth. So basically within seconds, I've got something that ordinarily I'd be sitting at home worried about my mat leave, or I'd be phoning up someone saying, do you know anything about it? Or I'd be searching all through our intranet for ages trying to find it. And it might not be personalized to me. That's a productization.
So does it know your length of service, etc., your entitlements?
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So basically that's a productization using a large language model and our own documentation. So a user-centered design technique needs to be laid on top of all of these large language models in order for them to operate effectively. Now that there would have taken me 2 hours instead of 20 seconds.
Yeah.
You can imagine the productivity savings we're seeing across our business is between 20 and 40% across each of these skills that we're putting in. We're saving our employees time. So it's fundamental that we use a user-centered design process and that large language models, as great the technology is, are augmented by a proper process.
It must be an interesting time for organisations like EY. So in my very simplistic view, large language models are devaluing knowledge. So the best paid knowledge worker jobs in the world are people who have spent a long time getting domain expertise.
Yes.
They're then paid to retain that domain expertise and implement it. Now, ChatGPT and other large language models, small language models, which I actually think are going to be more disruptive.
I agree.
Coming forward, they are going to have a fundamental impact on the value of knowledge.
Agreed.
You no longer need to hire an accountant to do maybe, I don't know, 40% of their role or 80% of their role. How does an organisation that basically sells knowledge, like EY, view that?
Well, it's incredibly disruptive, which is why 3 years ago we started our AI investment program and our technology investment program. So in the last 3 years, we've spent $1.8 billion improving our technology for our business. Now, that's not on client projects. That's ourselves, internal. So we built a thing called EY Fabric. EY Fabric, like a data fabric, effectively is I'll explain it to your listeners, a bit like Lego blocks of technology. It effectively is a home for all of the APIs, all of the technology that we use. So you can download Power BI instance from it. You can download Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. You can download our own RPA solutions. You can download our large language model applications. All of that is built into EY Fabric. And EY Fabric is a secure resource for anyone across our business to use. So we invested in that. We also invested a great deal in talent and technology talent. Now, we've not just gone out and decided to buy in a whole load of technologists. We've taken our existing staff and we've said to them, you're going to use a lot more technology in your day-to-day job, like your trainee accountant. We're going to give you a bunch of SaaS, a bunch of software as a service applications to help you do it. And we're going to give you what we call EYQ, that large language model enterprise interface to help you do your job. So you're going to be able to do way more because the mundane stuff will now be done for you. So we're going to take away 20, 40% of what you used to do. And we're going to give you maybe more clients. Maybe you'll pick up more clients to do the nice, exciting work, right?
And more billable hours, basically.
Exactly. Rather than do that mundane stuff. Now, when I say we've invested in talent, it's a significant investment as well. We offer every single one of our 400,000 employees worldwide a free technology MBA.
Wow.
A free master's in analytics or a free master's in sustainability are also available. And we do that through a thing called our Digital Badges program. It's an online learning program. You do 20, 30 of these badges, and then you get entered into the MBA program, then you do a dissertation. So basically, our investment in our technology and our talent, as well as our transformation, all the 3 T's, of our existing business processes, which is a big change program we're managing internally, is helping us improve what we do for our people and also obviously for our clients.
Do you not think a lot of organisations are getting distracted by AI thinking, how do I monetize it? Where the low-hanging fruit is actually your bottom line rather than the top line. It's about how do you make it your business leaner, more efficient, rather than saying how can I sell AI?
Totally. I couldn't agree more. I actually think we need to start talking more about changing and evolving our operating practices. So transformation internally is where we need to be going with AI. We need to be understanding what our use cases are across our back office. I'd start with back office. I'd start with HR, like that example, finance, legal. So the back office functions are rife with really mundane processes that can be very, very easily optimized. But that doesn't just mean give them an AI tool. That means look at what they currently do, understand how it could be optimized. It may not be a large language model. It may just be machine learning. But analyze what people currently do and analyze, these are use cases, analyze what could be augmented and make do a change program. So I'm saying to clients at the moment, it will cost you as much on technology as it will talent management and change. So that talent and transformation program should cost as much as the tech.
Yeah.
It's not just about switching it on. You need to manage this effectively and change your business models.
I think also the most successful organisations are going to be the people who rethink. So if you had, say, I don't know, a procurement process for a big organisation, hugely complicated, you think I can put an AI model backed with automation, it's going to have a massive impact.
Yeah.
The bigger impact is how can we do it differently?
Totally agree.
And it takes a lot to say burn the ships.
And so here's a real example. A client of ours is AstraZeneca. And about a year ago, Cindy Hoots, who's their global CTO, stood up at a big event and she said, we've been using AI for a very long time within our organization. It's a staple of our technology solutions. However, we are using generative AI and AI way more now than we used to. And she said, but all of that we need to do within our risk management and our frameworks for governance. And she said, so what used to take 10 years to build a new drug discovery work it's called, at R&D. It used to take 10 years, and that's lots of wet labs, they call them. That's lots of actual like machinery, and you're using your beakers and your all the chemicals and all the rest of it. But now she said we're moving to software labs instead of wet labs. So we're creating personalized drugs and doing drug discovery work purely through data. We're looking at what's worked for what symptom previously. We're looking at models that speed up the processes. And she said that's fundamentally changing things. But in order to do that, we have to ensure that we're doing it in the best interest of our staff, our shareholders, and our customers. So we need to govern how we're doing this to make sure that we're not doing things that may put our brand at risk, et cetera, et cetera. So she has this incredible AI program internally, but she's governing all of that at the board level to make sure they do it right.
I think in terms of, a lot of people forget that technology in any organisation should be there to leverage shareholder value.
Yeah.
People make it a lot more complicated, but if it doesn't deliver shareholder value, then what's the point? You make a good point on board level. So one of the companies I manage, Data Vita, we are a large data center AI. So our guys are right at the front of what they're doing. And I noticed they were fundamentally using these technologies wrong. So these are highly technology-driven people who sit in dark rooms, windowless data centers and love this technology, and they're fundamentally using it wrong, and there's a misunderstanding of it. They're using it like a search engine, which is wrong. So we've developed workshops that we're running to teach businesses actually what are these tools and what they're capable of.
Nice.
But what are you seeing at a board level of most organisations? Because AstraZeneca, they sound like that she's further ahead.
Oh, really far ahead, yeah.
So where are most boards just now? Do they understand the magnitude of change that's going to have to be adopted, or is there still a bit of you don't know what you don't know?
So I think the where will I start? So across the vast majority of, let's say, the FTSE top 100, I think there are programs in place now that are searching for use cases. They're doing proofs of value, as we call them, and they're seeing some early signs of, positive application. So I think that's the vast majority of the top 100 FTSE. However, it's not fair to say that this is being implemented enterprise-wide. It's still very much, I think, at the exploration stage. In EY, we're not at that exploration stage. We were a while back. We have now, every single person has a personal assistant, and that personal assistant is called EYQ, like Q as in question, not Q as in James Bond, which disappoints me because it should be James Bond, right? Preferably Sean Connery's. But no, the very, very interestingly, that EYQ assistant sits on all of our desktops, 400,000 people worldwide, has those skills built into it. And we've identified 2,000 skills that are common across our entire business that we're building into it. I don't see that going on everywhere else. No. I see some really good examples of it in pockets, but more than that, it's probably more at the exploration stage. So there's a large consumer products company who are about to launch their enterprise version. But that's the problem, you see. It's not one technology. You mentioned SLMs earlier, small language models. I think that because it's quite a nascent technology, people are scared to go all in on one particular model, one particular platform, one particular tech. And I think what we need to do is create that enterprise layer and then use the best tool for the job.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to agentic systems, can I just explain what that is for your users?
Yes,
okay. An agentic system is a number of different tasks, different little models that have been built to do a particular task, all talking to each other. That's when you get human level intelligence. It's, let's say you've got the HR skill that I mentioned earlier on. So I want to know what my mat leave is. That's a general task, right? So it's a general LLM skill. But I want that skill to talk to my email skill. So I want not only for you to tell me how many more weeks I can have for maternity leave, I want you now to do an email. I want you to give you one chain of command that's going to say, find out, then tell me, then immediately, if I confirm, send an email to HR to request 2 more weeks off. And then remind me in 2 weeks that my salary is about to reduce because I'm on extended mat leave and what to do about it. You know, what you want is you want an agentic system. You want them to talk to each other, to actually to deliberate, to plan, and to create the process effectively end to end.
I think actually we're going to see this year into the.
Yes.
We've got Chat GPT. It's always a system that captures the public's imagination, isn't it?
Yeah.
So apparently their new release, which is Strawberry or other code names, is going to be all agentic.
Yes.
And at that point, I think people will start to really go understand what these models are capable of in terms of when you have agents talking to agents talking to agents.
But they'll still have to be built, Danny.
Yes.
You'll still have to go, I'm an HR specialist in EY. I'm going to work with the techies. I'm going to speak to all my users what they actually want, or I'll go through all of my frequently asked questions. I'll start there. That's my use case. And then we'll build the skills into each of the different aspects of the agentic model. So that's why I'm saying 50% ought to be on the tech, 50% ought to be on the technology, the talent and the transformation program, because it really is a combination of the human and the computer that's going to get that interaction right.
And what about from a board who really doesn't understand it? How do they then manage the risks of ethics in a AI deployment?
So interestingly, it falls between a number of different stools at the board. So a lot of organizations already have a risk register. They already have a chief risk officer. They already have people who manage the risks. I mean, going back a few years ago, we had GDPR. So GDPR is your privacy legislation in the UK and EU and America and Australia, etc. You have to manage your GDPR and all these different things on the basis that if you're in a regulated industry, like, say, for instance, banking, a regulator can come in and audit you and say, hold on a minute, you're not following these regulations, and fine you. So there's existing risk registers, and AI ethics and bias and all the rest of it, all these hairy problems, all fit into that risk register, under technology. Now, that generally is managed by someone on the board, law or risk or whoever. But the CTO is the one who's implementing this. So he needs to be involved in that. And that's where it falls between stools. Some people have got their CTO, like Cindy Hoots at AstraZeneca, is managing it. But in another big financial services company that we work with, it's actually the head of law, the head of legal, who's on the board, who's managing it. And in yet another one, an investment bank, the CEO is ultimately responsible. And I'll tell you why it's the CEO. The CEO is ultimately responsible for it there because this organization has customers in Europe, and the EU AI Act is that legal framework that says you are responsible for any high-risk systems, et cetera, if you're found to be failing at 7% of global turnover as a fine, or 35 million euros. So it's a big fine, but it's also a big reputational risk. So that's why he owns it for the board, because they have so many customers in Europe. They have to be absolutely, cognizant of that legislation.
Okay. And in terms of the issues with AI adoption, I think are going to be driven by 2 main things. One is skills, i.e. people to do it. And we've kind of already touched on that. I think the next big one organisations are going to struggle with is their own data. So organisations have been amassing data at an incredible rate, and that's only going to get exponentially worse now with these systems. But most of that data is rubbish.
Yes.
Most of that data is in silos. Most of it contradicts each other. Do you think that organisations should treat their data the same way they do their financial governance? Have someone or a department of people who's there to ensure the integrity of that data? Because without that, putting a large language model or small language model over the top of it is meaningless.
Yep. No, you raise a great point. One of our clients is a huge automotive client in the UK, and the CTO asked me into a meeting and he said, our data is not in the place where we want it to be. We've been holding on to data since these first cars came out, like 50 years ago, just in case. Because, I mean, they might be required legally to provide it, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, so we've got amassed a huge amount of data. We don't necessarily have it all in the right place, right? The language, the taxonomy of their data architecture may not all be in the right place. And the costs are increasing exponentially. So if you think about the cost of all of that data, it's huge, right? So what we really want you to look at, and this is all cloud-based costs, what we really want you to look at, what is it we need to keep? And how do we data cleanse? How do we incentivize our employees who work for our company, thousands, actually to not hold on to all that? Because it's so easy now for it all to go off to the cloud from your desktop, right? There's nothing on anybody's desktops anymore.
It's replicated, it's backed up, it's
Exactly.
retained.
How do we incentivize them? And how do we do a data cleansing exercise? How do we manage it? Because we want to use AI, Katrina. I said, yes. This is
I get that.
this is what you would call a digital spine of an organization. You cannot use AI effectively, really effective. I mean, you can do that HR assist, right? You can take a bunch of policy documents and pop them in. That's fine. But if you truly want to transform your operating model, you're going to have to think about data and you're going to have to think about that digital spine and getting it into place. Another one of our clients has already been through that journey. They've been through this huge exercise and they're absolutely reaping the rewards now. And yet another client is only 3 years old. And so as a digital native, it's all, I mean, it's perfect. It's in great shape. They've got a lot of it, but it's in great shape because they're a digital business. They create more footprint than anyone else. But I think it varies. But gosh, you can't use AI effectively without it.
No, you can't. Got time for one more question because we're about to get kicked out the studio.
Oh, right.
So
that's gone quickly, hasn't it?
Really quickly, and I could speak to you all day about it. So what advice would you give organisations, maybe even the organisations that can't afford or don't have chief data officers and analytics and CTOs, what advice would you give organisations? Because you actually gave me the statistic of the amount of organisations in the UK that aren't large enterprises. The majority of the UK is small and medium companies.
Yep.
What do you say to the people who are looking to get an advantage? Where do you start?
Yep. So, well, obviously in Scotland we have the Scottish AI Alliance and they've created effectively a playbook. It's online. You can find it at the Scottish AI Alliance's website. It's effectively a playbook about all of the different large language models. There's a free course there which anyone can take and it gives you the basics of AI. So I'd start with some training. I'd start with looking up exactly what AI models can be deployed in your business. The second place I'd go to is I'd look to find either a young school leaver or a grad or someone in your business, if you have someone like that, who you could give it to as a project. I think a digital native, giving them something like this as a project to do, there are so many open source platforms, it won't cost you a lot of money to do exploration and experimentation. Give someone the job to say, I want you to explore use cases in our business. And start with your kind of back office functions. Even a small business has back office functions. You've got finance to do, you've got HR stuff to do, you've got a risk register, et cetera, et cetera. Start with something there, do a project, map the as-is journey, and then get the individual who's managing this project to map a new journey using a large language model off the shelf, for instance. But make sure that you don't put anything confidential into that. Yes. Make sure you understand, and you'll get that from the Scottish AI Alliance website, or you'll get that from various different training programs that are free. Make sure that you're not dealing with that, or you anonymize data, and you need to set a kind of standard across your organization to make sure that people understand and are aware. We had mandated training in our business quite some time ago around this. So everyone is aware, and contractually we're bound to only use the technology that has been approved. So we can't go off and use a bunch of other large language models to help us do our jobs. We can only use the prescribed ones by our business. But fortunately, they're brilliant. Yeah,
they're good. So I feel like we've only touched the tip of the iceberg with this conversation. Yeah. We could have went on for potentially hours. Your story was absolutely fascinating. So thanks for coming in and sharing it.
Pleasure.
And hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Great.
So I really appreciate it.
Brilliant.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you, and thanks again.
Cheers.